I built a life with my hands. 31 years as a licensed electrician in Ontario, running wire through walls from Barrie to Sudbury in winters that would stop most men before they got their boots on. At 58, I thought I understood hard things. Then my son sat across from me at Easter dinner and told me to stop texting him. Not quietly, not later, not in private, right there at the table. His wife was refilling the water glasses. My daughter had her phone out under the table, the way she always does when she thinks nobody's watching. My nephew Liam was at the corner, the way he always ended up at family dinners, slightly sideways to the room. My son said, "Dad, honestly, it's a lot. Every day, sometimes twice a day, I'm at work." I said, "I'd just like to know you're all right." "We're fine. We're always fine. You don't need to check in every single day." And my daughter put her phone down and nodded. Just once. Small. The kind of nod that means she'd been waiting for someone else to say it first. I looked around the table. There were 6 of us. Not one person said anything. The chair across from me was the one my wife Helen used to sit in, and it had been empty for 4 years, and it was still the first place my eyes went when a room went quiet. Liam looked at me once, then looked back down at his plate. I said, "All right." I said it the way my own father used to say it when there was nothing left to say. 2 words and a full stop. I passed the rolls to my son's wife and I ate the rest of my dinner, and I washed the dishes by myself, and I drove home alone on the 400 with the radio off. That night I put my phone on the kitchen counter, and I looked at it for a long time. Then I did exactly what my son asked me to do. The first week was the strangest. I'm not going to dress it up for you. I kept reaching for the phone out of habit, the way you reach for coffee that isn't there anymore. Monday morning, I almost texted my son about the Leafs game the night before. Stopped myself, put the phone down, made eggs instead. I want to be honest with you about those first few days, because I think you deserve the honest version and not the cleaned up one. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I made excuses the way I'd been making excuses for years. My son runs a team at a software company in Toronto. 40-some people under him, constant pressure, 2 kids at home. My daughter manages an HR department for a logistics company in Mississauga, and she commutes 2 hours a day, and she has her own life and her own exhaustion. I told myself they were genuinely busy. I'd been telling myself that for about 3 years. My wife Helen died in the April of 2020, COVID year, which meant the funeral was 11 people in a parking lot, and I held it together because I had to, and then I went home to a house that was very quiet. She was 54, pancreatic cancer, 7 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I was there every day, and then I was in an empty house, and I kept picking up the phone because it was the only thing I knew how to do. I'm a tradesman. I know how to fix things. I know how to run a job. I do not know how to sit in silence without trying to do something about it. So I'd call, or text, just checking in, just saying hello, just a photo of the dock at the cottage because the light was good, and I thought they'd like it. They didn't always answer. That's the part I'd been not thinking about. The cottage is on Balsam Lake, up in the Kawarthas. Helen and I bought the lot in 1993 for what seemed like a lot of money at the time, and what now sounds like a joke. We built the original cabin ourselves over 2 summers. I ran the electrical, her brother helped with the framing, and Helen did everything else because she was the kind of woman who did everything else. We added the screened porch in 2004. We added the guest bunkie the summer before she got sick. Every summer of my kids' lives happened at that cottage. Every Thanksgiving, every August long weekend, hockey bags and sand in the carpet, and the smell of bug spray and lake water. My son learned to swim off that dock. My daughter had her first serious boyfriend up there and pretended she didn't. 30 years of August. It's worth considerably more now than it was. That's just Ontario cottage country in 2024. It's worth more than the house in town. I thought about that sometimes, and I pushed the thought away because I didn't like where it went. The second week I started keeping track, not out of spite, out of the same instinct that makes you check a breaker panel you always assumed was solid. Who reaches out when I stop reaching? It took 12 days to get the answer, and it wasn't the answer I'd braced myself for. My nephew Liam called on a Wednesday afternoon. He's 24. His father, my younger brother Dale, died of a heart attack when Liam was 17, and his mother had been out of the picture since before that. Liam finished high school in my spare room, and I co-signed his first apprenticeship application, and he texts me photos of his job sites, the way I used to text him photos of the dock. He called to ask if I'd eaten, not in a fussing way, just, "Hey, did you eat? What did you have? Okay, good." We talked for 20 minutes about a transformer he'd had to replace, and about a raccoon that had gotten into the job site trailer, and about whether the Jays had any shot this year, which they did not. He didn't ask for anything. He never asks for anything. In 12 days of silence, he was the only one who called. I did the arithmetic while we talked. 12 days, nothing from my son, nothing from my daughter. Not a text, not a check-in, not a thumbs up on a photo. I'd been the one filling every gap, and now that I'd stopped filling it, there was just a gap. The arithmetic was not kind. After we hung up, Liam texted, "You doing okay though, for real?" I typed back, "I'm good, kid, I'm good." Then I sat in the kitchen with the light going gray outside, and I thought about the cottage. 2 weeks after that, I went up early to open the place for the season. 3rd week of May, before the long weekend. I do it every year. Drive up Thursday, get the water running, check the dock, clear out whatever got in over winter. Always done it myself. Helen used to come with me for that first weekend, and we'd drink coffee on the dock in our jackets, 'cause it was still cold, and the loons would be back, and that was the whole weekend, and it was enough. I was loading the truck in the driveway when my son called. He called me. That was the first thing that registered. He didn't text, he called. "Hey Dad." Warm. Very warm in the way a voice gets when it wants something. "Hey. So, random question. You going up to open the cottage this weekend?" "Yeah." Right. "Hey, so, I've been meaning to talk to you about the cottage, actually." A pause. "Just, Priya and I were thinking long term, it's a lot of property to manage, especially as you get older." I said, "I'm 58. "No, totally, yeah, I just mean eventually. Like, have you thought about what you'd want to do with it?" I said, "I'm going to use it." "Right, no, of course." Another pause. "We just thought it might be worth talking to someone about the financial side of it, like a planner or whatever, before it becomes, a complicated situation." I said, "I'll think about it." He said he'd talk to me soon and hung up. I sat in the truck in my own driveway for a few minutes. Then I started the engine and drove north. The thing about a 3-hour drive when your head is full is that there's nowhere to put it. I went over the conversation about 6 different ways and arrived at the same place each time. He hadn't asked how I was. He hadn't mentioned the 12 days of silence. He'd asked about the property. I opened the cottage by myself. The dock needed 2 new boards. I put them in. The loons were back. 3 weeks after that phone call, I was picking up my neighbor Earl's mail while he was visiting his sister in Thunder Bay. Earl's been across the road from me since 1997, and we don't talk much, but we shovel each other's driveways in the winter without ever discussing it, because that's just what you do. While I was dropping the mail on his porch, I got a notification on my phone. A group chat, added by my daughter. Except she hadn't meant to add me. I could tell from the name of the chat. It was just her and my son and his wife, and I could see from the one message that had come in before I realized what I was looking at, that they'd been talking about this for a while. My son, realistically if we list it right after, Kawartha comps in that condition, 900 easy, probably more. My daughter, but we'd have to split it 3 ways if he leaves it equal, unless. My son, yeah, that's the thing. Liam's not blood technically, depends what the will says. My daughter, do we even know what the will says? I left the chat without responding. I put my phone in my jacket pocket, and I walked back across the road to my house, and I sat down at the kitchen table, and I looked at the wall for about 10 minutes. Then I put the kettle on, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. They weren't talking about losing me. They were talking about the property value. They were having that conversation in a group chat named Family Stuff while I was picking up a neighbor's mail on a Tuesday afternoon. I didn't say a word about it, not to them, not to Liam, not yet. I want to tell you something about Liam, because it matters. He's been in his electrical apprenticeship for 3 years now. He's good, better than I was at his age, technically. He'd been working toward his red seal, and he had the hours logged, and he had the exam scheduled for September. What he didn't have was the certification fees, and the toolkit upgrade his foreman said he needed for the next level of the program. Roughly $9,000 total, which is not a fortune in the abstract, but is a complete impossibility on an apprentice's wage with no savings net and no family to ask. He hadn't told me directly. I found out from his foreman, who I still know from my own years in the trade, who mentioned it in passing the way tradespeople mention things, sideways, not looking at you, like they're talking about weather. I didn't say anything to Liam about it, but I started thinking. I've got the house, I've got the cottage, I've got my RRSP, which is healthy because I've been maxing contributions since Helen died, because there wasn't anything else to spend it on. I've got a modest TFSA and a pension from the union that covers what I need. It's not a complicated estate, but it's more than I let myself think about on a regular basis. Helen and I had written our wills together in 2016. Straightforward. Equal thirds to each child, with a note that Liam got something, because we'd talked about it and agreed. I hadn't touched the will since she died. I called my lawyer, a man named Martin Ford, whose office is above the pharmacy on Dunlop Street, and who has been doing my paperwork since I refinanced the house in 1999. I told him I needed to talk about some routine updates. He signed some papers I actually did need signed, and then he leaned back and looked at me the way someone looks at wiring they want to inspect. Your will, he said. When's the last time you looked at it? 2016. He tapped his pen on the desk. Things change, people change. Sometimes what made sense then doesn't reflect what's true now. I know. I'm not telling you what to do, Neil. I'm telling you the document isn't permanent just because it's signed. You can update it when circumstances change. That's what the word update is for. I drove home with that sitting in the passenger seat the whole way down the 400. I didn't do anything about it for 6 weeks, not until my birthday, June 14th. I turned 58. I hadn't sent any reminders. I didn't expect anything particular. But they knew. It's the same date it's been for 58 years, and we've had birthday dinners every year since the kids were born, and even in the years they were busy they'd called. By noon I had a text from my son. Happy birthday, Dad. Crazy month, we'll call soon. He did not call soon. He did not call at all. He had asked me not to text him, and so we had successfully created a situation where neither of us was saying anything. By 3 in the afternoon, I had a text from my daughter. Happy birthday, love you, and 2 cake emojis. Exclamation points. That was the entirety of it. I made myself a sandwich and ate it at the counter because sitting at the kitchen table alone on your birthday, with plates for 6, felt like more than I needed to do to myself. At 4:45, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Liam was standing on my porch, holding a flat box from a bakery in town, and looking slightly sheepish, the way he always looks when he's done something he thinks might be embarrassing. He'd driven 40 minutes from where he was working. It's not a big deal, he said before I could say anything. I just figured, birthday. The cake had a lopsided hockey stick piped onto it in orange icing, and it said, Happy birthday, Uncle Neil, in letters that ran together at the end, because he'd tried to do too much on a small surface. He'd picked it up from the Ukrainian bakery on the north end of town, which makes the best pierogies in Simcoe County and very average cakes. I could not say a single word for a moment, which, if you know me, is unusual. It's ugly, he said. It's not ugly. We had it at the kitchen table. He told me about a job he was on in Innisfil, a commercial build, a nightmare of a panel box. He talked about the Red Seal exam the way he always talked about hard things, sideways, not looking directly at it. I asked if he was ready, and he said mostly, and I knew mostly meant he was worried about something he wasn't telling me. He left around 8 because he had an early start. I stood at the end of the driveway and watched the taillights of his truck until they disappeared at the bend. Then I went back inside and I sat at the kitchen table and I got a notepad from the kitchen drawer and a pen and I started writing. It wasn't a plan, it was 2 lists. On the left, every time in the past 2 years that my son or daughter had made contact that wasn't about logistics, not about the cottage, not about paperwork, not about something they needed. Calls just to talk. Visits with no agenda. The left column had 8 entries. 2 of them were Christmas. One was the anniversary of Helen's death, because my daughter had sent flowers that year, which I'll give her. On the right, Liam. I stopped counting at 60 because he calls about once a week and texts when something happens, and he drove 40 minutes with a bad hockey stick cake from a Ukrainian bakery on a Tuesday evening because it was my birthday. I looked at those 2 columns for a long time. And I have to tell you something, because I know how a man can lie to himself at a kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night with a pen in his hand. I asked myself, are you doing this because you're hurt? Yes, I'll admit that. I'm 58 years old, and my kids sat across from me at Easter and told me I was texting too much, and that hurt me, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't. I've been pretending it didn't since April, and it hasn't worked. But I asked myself a second question. If Helen walked in right now, pulled out a chair, and I showed her these two lists, what would she say? I knew exactly what she'd say. She'd look at both columns, look at me, and say, "Neil, you're not deciding who to punish. You're deciding what's true." That's what she'd say. She was always better at the difference between those two things than I was. The next morning, I called Martin Ford and told him I wanted an hour. Before I signed anything, I gave my kids a chance. I want that on the record because it matters to me. I broke the silence myself. 2 months of nothing, and I was the one who called. My son picked up on the third ring, his voice doing that slightly formal thing it does when he's not sure what register to be in. "Dad, everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I want to take you to coffee, this week, whenever works." A pause, like just to catch up? "Yeah." "Okay, let me check Thursday." He did not check Thursday. He texted me 2 days later. "Thursday's packed, let's find another time." I called my daughter. She sounded rushed. She's always rushing somewhere. I asked if I could take her to lunch. Any Saturday, she picks. "Oh, I'd love that, Dad. Things are insane right now. Let me look at the calendar." She did not get back to me. I waited 10 days and tried once more. My son said the sentence I will hear for a long time. "Can't this week, Dad? Can we sort this out over the summer? I'll come up to the cottage." The cottage. There it was. I said sure, and I hung up. And I got out the notepad, and I crossed out the last thing on it. The last thing was a question mark I'd written next to my son's name, which I'd been leaving there in case I was wrong about what I was seeing. Monday morning I drove to Martin's office. He went through it slowly and carefully, and asked me questions out loud and waited for full answers. He'd known me for 25 years. He'd done the paperwork when Helen and I bought the cottage. He was not celebrating. He was careful, which is what you want from a lawyer. Then he read the new distribution back to me. The cottage on Balsam Lake and the contents, held in trust for Liam until age 27, then conveyed outright. An amount equal to the Red Seal certification costs and tools, paid directly to the apprenticeship program and the supplier. The RRSP and remaining assets split equally between my son and daughter, equally to the dollar. I want to be clear about this. I did not cut my children out. I would never cut my children out. They're my children. I drove them to hockey in the dark at 5:30 in the morning for 9 years, and I don't take that back. They each receive a real sum, meaningful money, but it will be less than they'd calculated when they thought the cottage was going to be included. Martin asked if I wanted him to notify them by letter. I thought about it for about 5 seconds. "No," I said, "put them in a room with me in it while I can answer for it." He looked at me for a moment. "They're not going to forgive you for that." "I know, but they'll have to look at me." 3 weeks after I signed the updated will, I slipped on ice clearing the front walk and cracked 2 ribs on the railing. Nothing dramatic. But at 58, cracked ribs mean a night at Royal Victoria Hospital for observation, which is the rule, not negotiable. Liam got there in under 2 hours. He'd been on a job site in Bradford when I texted him, which means he left a job, which I only found out later when I asked him directly. He sat in the chair beside the bed all night. Didn't complain. Brought me a Tim Hortons coffee in the morning because he knows I don't trust hospital coffee, and the nurse let it through because Liam has a face that makes people let things through. My son arrived at 11:20 the next morning. He asked how I was, listened to about 30 seconds of the answer, and then stepped into the hallway. The door didn't close all the way. I heard him ask the nurse if there had been any cognitive assessment, whether the injury had any neurological component, whether there was anything on the chart. Not, is he going to be okay, whether there was documentation. My daughter came at noon. She held my hand and called me Dad in a soft voice, and asked twice, gently, whether I'd been feeling confused lately, whether the fall had made me feel disoriented at all. Liam was in the corner chair, not saying anything, getting smaller and smaller. I understood very clearly what was happening in that room. They were building a case, and I was lying in a hospital bed, in a paper gown with 2 cracked ribs, and no one had asked if I needed anything from home. That afternoon I called Martin from the hospital room. I said 4 words, "Send the letters, do it now." The letters went out on cream paper, his office letterhead, nothing dramatic. The Burroughs Estate. Will review meeting. Your presence is requested Thursday, September 12th, 10 a.m. at the offices of Martin Forda, barrister and solicitor, Dunlop Street, Barrie, Ontario. That's all it said. But I know what a letter like that sounds like when you've been doing arithmetic about a cottage on Balsam Lake. It sounds like, finally. My son called me twice in the 5 days after the letter arrived. Twice, which is more than he'd called in 4 months combined. Dad, hey, so this meeting, what's this about exactly? Just some paperwork I want to get in order. Right. No, that's good. That's responsible. Hey, I was thinking if you want, Priya and I could help with the cottage for the season. Do the opening together, make a weekend of it. I said, that'd be nice. Yeah, totally. So this meeting, is it about the cottage specifically or more general? It's general. Okay, cool, yeah, we'll be there. My daughter texted a photo of her kids at a soccer game. First photo she'd sent me of her own volition in about 8 months. And Liam called me that Sunday, confused, holding his envelope. Why am I invited to a lawyer's meeting? I don't understand what's happening. Your family, come. Uncle Neil. His voice got careful. I don't want anything. I want you to know that, whatever this is, I'm not there for that. I know. Come anyway. Thursday, September 12th, 10 a.m. They all parked on Dunlop Street, right in front of Martin's office above the pharmacy, where this town has been watching people come and go for 30 years. They came up the stairs in good clothes. My son had a leather notebook under his arm, which I thought about for a while afterward. The fact that he'd brought something to write in. Martin's boardroom has a round oak table and a window that faces the street, and at 10 in the morning in September the light comes through it and sits right in the middle of the room. My son took a chair across from me, not beside me, set the notebook down, uncapped his pen. My daughter sat with her hands folded, a small, careful smile. Liam sat near the door, shoulders up, like he was trying to take up less space. Martin came in with a single folder and sat down without opening it. Thank you all for coming, he said. Of course, said my son, warm. This is the right call, Dad, responsible. Martin said, before we begin, I want to note for the record that Mr. Burroughs was assessed by his family physician on August 30th, following his hospital stay. Full cognitive screening. I have a copy of that assessment. My son started to say something, and Martin held up one finger, not unkindly, and continued. The will was updated on August 14th. That is 2 weeks before Mr. Burroughs' fall. I draw your attention to the sequence. The pen in my son's hand stopped moving. Martin opened the folder and read. When he got to the cottage, my daughter made a sound. Not a word, a sound. When he finished with the distribution schedule, the room was quiet for about 10 seconds. My son was doing the math. I watched him do it. I know what his face looks like when he's calculating. He's had that expression since he was 9. That's not. My daughter's voice cracked. Dad, the cottage. We grew up there. I know, I said. I was there. My son stood up slowly. He wasn't warm anymore. Liam's not even family, he said. The room went very still. Say that again, I said, quietly. He didn't. Liam stood up. He'd gone white. I don't want it, he said. His voice was steady, but I could see his hands. I don't want the cottage. I don't want anything. This isn't why I. He pressed both hands flat on the table. Tell them, Uncle Neil. Tell them this isn't what I asked for. I know, I said. Then take it back. No. He stared at me. No? Sit down, Liam. He sat. He was shaking slightly. You just told this room, in front of a lawyer, that you don't want it, I said. Do you understand what you did? He shook his head. You proved me right. I looked at him for a moment. How many times have you driven 40 minutes to check on me for no reason? You're not old. How many Christmases did you spend in my kitchen when you had nowhere else to go? That's not the same thing. You left a job site when I was in the hospital before I'd even told anyone what room I was in. I looked down the table. That's what I'm leaving it to. Not a debt, not a calculation, that. My daughter was crying, quietly, genuinely, and I don't doubt it. We have lives too, Dad. You don't know what it's been like. I know, I said. Tell me, I've been asking. My son hadn't spoken in a while. He was looking at Liam with an expression I couldn't quite read, something he was working through slowly and not liking what he found. Then he looked at me and said very quietly, "Is this about the group chat?" I didn't answer. "Dad." His voice was rough. That conversation was. "I know what it was," I said. Silence. "You're always going to be my kids," I said. "That is not in question, and it never was. But a cottage isn't a birthright. It's 30 years of August. It belongs to whoever was there for it." Martin quietly noted something in the folder. After the meeting, my son left first. He picked up the notebook, the one he'd brought to write in, that he hadn't written anything in, and he walked out without looking at me. My daughter hugged me at the door. It was a real hug, the kind from when she was small. She whispered, "I'm still angry," against my shoulder, and then she left. Liam and I sat in the boardroom for a while, after everyone else had gone. Martin brought us coffee, and then discreetly found somewhere else to be. "I meant it," Liam said finally, "about not wanting it. I know. It's going to make things weird with them. For a long time." "Things were already weird," I said. "Now they're just honest." The weeks after that were quiet in a different way than before. Not the quiet of waiting. Just quiet. My son didn't call. My daughter sent one long email, 3 pages, that said I'd always put work first, and maybe Liam was a substitute for the son I'd actually wanted. The son who was different from my son. I read the whole thing twice. I typed 6 different replies and deleted all of them. What I sent finally was, "I hear you. The door here is open. I love you, Dad." She didn't reply, but she didn't block me either, which I counted as something. Earl came over one Saturday and spent 2 hours fixing the eavesdrow on the north side of the garage, which did not need fixing. He didn't say anything about the meeting or my kids or Liam. When he was done, he looked at the garage and said, "Decent slope. You won't get ice backup," and he went home. That's a whole paragraph in Simcoe County. Liam passed his Red Seal exam in October. He texted me a photo of the certificate, which looked exactly like all certificates look, and underneath it he'd typed, "Thanks for believing I could do this when I didn't." I put my phone face down on the counter and stood at the kitchen window for a while, because some things you need a minute for. And then one Sunday in November, at 6:15 in the evening, my phone rang. It wasn't Liam. It was my son. I let it ring twice, then I picked up. "Hey, Dad." "Hey." A long pause. I let it be long. I had learned by then how to let a silence be a silence without filling it. "I was just thinking about the cottage," he said. "The summer, when we were kids." Another pause. "Remember when I fell off the dock that first summer and you jumped in with all your clothes on?" I didn't say anything for a moment. I sat down on the arm of the couch. "Your mother at me for a week," I said. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Yeah, a beat. She would've." We were quiet for a little while. It wasn't an uncomfortable quiet. It was the kind of quiet that has something in it. "I'm not calling about the will," he said. "I know. I don't know. It's Sunday." "Yeah," I said. "It is." He told me about his week. He told me his daughter lost a tooth and swallowed it by accident. And they'd had a whole conversation about whether the tooth fairy could track it. He told me there was a guy at work who'd been microwaving the same fish lunch every day for 6 months, and the entire floor had given saying anything. He talked for about 12 minutes. About nothing. About everything that happens in 12 minutes of a regular week, when you call someone, and there's nothing wrong, and you just call. When he was done, he said, "Anyway, that's about it." "That's a good call," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I didn't say it was fine. It wasn't fine yet, but I said, "I know, son, I know." "Okay," he cleared his throat. "I'll talk to you." "Sunday," I said. "I'll be here." He calls most Sundays now. Sometimes he misses one. He's got a life and 2 kids, and that fish microwave colleague, and I'm not going to pretend everything is fixed. Because fixing things isn't how this works. You don't repair something that's been running on empty for years in a single phone call. You start calling again. That's all. You start calling again. My daughter sent a card at Christmas. Inside it, in her own handwriting, she wrote, "I'm still figuring out how I feel about all of this. But you're still my dad, and I know you did what you thought was right." I put it on the mantle next to the photo of Helen and me at the cottage in 1998. It's still there. Liam drove down for Christmas Eve. He brought pierogies from the Ukrainian bakery, and we made them together in the kitchen and ate them standing at the counter and listened to the radio and didn't need to be anywhere else. It's February now. Cold in the way February is cold up here. Not dramatic, just relentless. The kind of cold that's been here so long it stopped being an event and became just the condition of things. I'll be 59 in June. Liam's already asked if he can come up and open the cottage with me this spring. I told him he could drive this time because I want to watch the highway and not watch the road, which is something I never let myself do alone. My son asked last Sunday whether there'd be room at the cottage in August. He asked the way you ask when you know you might hear no. I told him yes. I told him there was always room. That was never the part that was in question. Helen used to say the cottage wasn't really a place. It was just the excuse. The excuse to stop commuting, stop scheduling, stop being useful for 48 hours and sit on a dock and let the loons do their thing. She said that was the whole point of it, and she was right about most things. I've been going out to the dock in the mornings before it gets light, just standing there. The lake's frozen solid right now, gray-white, no movement, just the tree line and the dark, and whatever birds are still around in February, which is not many. But it's quiet in a way that I've stopped being afraid of. Quiet doesn't mean empty, I know that now. It took me 58 years to learn the difference, and a long silence that I started, and my kids didn't notice, and one kid noticed immediately, and a Ukrainian bakery cake with a hockey stick on it, and a pencil mark I found last October, tucked behind the door frame in the bunkie, where Helen had measured Liam's height one summer when he was 11 and staying with us for the week. I never painted over it. I don't know if I ever will.